Beloved, we pause in reverence before the wonder of life, the wonder of this moment of our sharing, both in the sadness of loss and in the celebration of life. We pause in reverence before all things intangible, things eyes cannot see, nor ears hear, nor hands touch. We pause in reverence before the mystery of birth, the flower, the kitten, the infant child, each with a will to live, each striving to grow. We pause in reverence before the mystery of unfolding years, when life's energy surges within us and we experience the fullness of life. We pause in reverence before the mystery of death, when all striving to grow has ended and life has ceased. We pause in reverence before the mystery of love, which sustains us through our years and enables us to endure our sorrow and conquer our grief. We pause in reverence and give thanks for this moment as we say goodbye. Would you pray with me? Eternal God, we are thankful for the gift of life and for this service which helps us to face the mysteries of life and death. We are especially thankful for sacred words which inspire our faith and give us comfort. We are thankful, too, for the life of David Lee Smith, who was a gift to us, to his family, to all friends, and so many others. As we remember David Lee's life, we express our gratitude and embrace our memories. And we also affirm our desire to live each day with gratitude and thankfulness. So now may the eternal power which draws all life to goodness, beauty, and truth guide us in this time of grieving and saying goodbye, that our spirits may be renewed in strong faith, in noble purpose, and in transforming love. Amen. Well, beloved, would you rise as you are willing and able for our opening hymn, Be Thou My Vision.
What is Success by Ralph Waldo Emerson. To laugh often and much, to win the respect of intelligent people and affection of children, to earn the approbation of honest critics and endure the betrayal of false friends, to appreciate beauty, to find the best in others, to give of oneself, to leave the world a bit better, whether by a healthy child, a garden patch, or a redeemed social condition. To have played and laughed with enthusiasm and sung with exultation, to know even one life has breathed easier because you have lived. This is to have succeeded.
Good afternoon. My name is Les Coleman, and I'm Lizzie's youngest brother. I want to share a few thoughts today about my brother-in-law, David Lee. David Lee was an extremely intelligent, well-read, and well-spoken man. He was able to discuss almost any subject and always had well-thought-out and unique views on just about everything. He and I were on opposite sides of quite a few issues, but when we discussed them, he always politely disagreed, stated his opinions, and then we moved on. Absolutely no judgment, which was always appreciated, and it showed me what kind of man he was. I will be forever grateful for the work David Lee and Lizzie did on our family's genealogy. They trace us back to Northern Ireland and have traced us coming to America in the late 1800s. David Lee then made and framed our family tree and made sure all of the siblings got a copy. Ours hangs in our office. He didn't do it for the recognition. He did it because he loved genealogy and sharing his knowledge and talents. Again, that's just the kind of man he was. Another wonderful thing that David Lee did was to find a stack of letters in our mom's garage that were written by our grandfather, who me and my siblings never got to meet as he was killed in the line of duty as a fireman in 1943. These letters were written by our grandfather to our father, who at the time was in the Army training to ship overseas in World War II. David Lee put them in a notebook form, complete with footnotes, and had them printed so each one of our family members got this tremendous gift. Why would he do this? Because that's the kind of man that he was. One last gift David Lee and Lizzie gave our family was a notebook entitled The Life and Legacy of Lawrence Coleman. Lawrence was our great-grandfather, and this wonderful piece of our family's history and a great gift to us all. Again, him doing that just shows what kind of man that he was. A few weeks prior to his passing, Liz and I stayed with David Lee while Lizzie went to a concert for one of her grandchildren. We had a very nice visit, and we were watching the Detroit Lions together. He asked for a remote control so he could adjust the volume. He hit a few wrong buttons and ended up changing the channels and muting the sound. After explaining his frustration with having to pay extra to watch football on YouTube TV, we figured out how to get it back to the right channel and on the right volume. Although we went to help Lizzie have the ability to go to a concert, the gift was really to us for being able to spend that one last time with David Lee. I'll close now with this. Reverend Dr. David Lee Smith, you will be forever missed, always respected, and never forgotten. But most of all, always loved.
Sorry for the delay. We are gathered to talk about David Lee Smith, father, stepfather, uncle, husband, musician, pastor, and in my case, friend. DL had a curious mind, not strangely curious, but he would thirst for knowledge on a wide array of topics. One example I became very aware of was standard time. The concept of having a progression of time divided by logic was not an easy law to make happen. Before the implementation of standard time, the time was whatever a particular station manager's watch told him it was. You could end up with a schedule that showed a train leaving about 7:15 and getting to its destination about 4:30. He was building a presentation to give to groups. I saw an early version of that. We gathered around the table. We were visiting Lizzie and David Lee in Maine, and he gave us the full presentation. It was interesting. Later, back home at a pool party, we found, again, DL's enthusiasm. He joined us in the pool, and I'll never know for sure, but I felt cornered by the lecture and update on his latest findings. Genealogy was a passion. David Lee gifted my siblings and I a very nice 22 by 26, and I measured, snapshot of the Coleman-McCullough family tree. Another example, after my mother passed, in a cedar chest, there was a cache of letters from Lewis Sr., my grandfather, to his son, my dad. They described day-to-day life in 1943 with a major war going on. He would write about dinners he made. He was the cook for the number 12 Engine House, which is about 2 blocks from where they lived. And those letters allowed Lewis Sr. to step out of the fog. We felt we knew a person, where before he only existed in verbal history. How does David Lee fit this? He took the letters and he cleaned the grammar up. He took them and had them bound and printed. He then gave each of us a copy. So instead of a verbal account of a man, we have a clear written account of a fraction of his life and times, all because of that curious mind. David Lee, we will miss you.
I'm Linda, the eldest of the group. I'm first going to read a letter from my daughter, Mary Martell, who lives in Tennessee. Mary writes, I'm sorry I am unable to attend in person, so I went with the next best thing, a tribute to my Uncle Dave. When I was a young human, maybe 9 or 10 years old, my dad, Dave, was a tired man. Stressed and worried, he just wanted to rest when he got home. But when my cousins were around, he lit up like a Christmas tree. He became attentive, playful, loving, and quite a humorist. I did not resent my cousins for their ability to coax my dad from his guarded shell. Instead, I longed for my own Uncle Dave. Although I didn't meet Reverend Dr. David Lee Smith until long after he'd become a member of the family, I was beside myself with joy. Meeting him for the first time felt like Christmas morning, when the things you always wanted is the thing you were lucky enough to open first. I fell in love with my Uncle Dave immediately. He saw me. I wasn't invisible. Seeing has little to do with opening your eyes, but what you feel inside that counts, and it's what you know without anyone telling you. I knew I'd hit the jackpot. I was able to visit with him and my Aunt Lizzie when he chose hospice. Everything done for the last time is a miracle, no matter how ordinary. When it is the last time, it is beautiful and somber. When it's finally understood, every moment counts. As Aunt Lizzie took a much needed pause, I sat with my Uncle Dave. He walked me through his autobiography. He showed me pictures of his military activities. He gave me copies of the genealogy he had done for the family. We talked about life, the universe, and everything. I asked him if he was okay. He said yes. Are you afraid? No, I'm just tired. What do you think happens when we die? He chuckled, well, I guess I'm about to find out. I laughed too. One morning later, this conversation, I sent him a text. Good morning, beautiful human, I love you. He sent me a rare one back. And a good morning to you, such a beautiful human being. Your love is all over the world, and I so much appreciate being a part of that. I hope you're getting some back. I know I'm sending my love to you. Lizzie and I so much enjoyed your visit with us. It was so wonderful. I hope you have a wonderful day. It was the last text I got from him. Emily Dickinson wrote, unable are the loved to die, for love is immortality. Nay, it is deity. Unable they that love to die, for love reforms vitality into divinity. For me, his love was a reflection of his spirit. His immortality of sorts will live on in me because I was loved by my Uncle Dave. Being the eldest of the family and had different paths, shall we say, I've known the Reverend Dr. Lee Smith, David Lee Smith, more than 30 years. He was involved in the Grand West Association when I first became involved as a layperson, and then when I first began the process of beginning seminary. When I was in the final stage of the process of becoming an ordained minister in the Grand West Association of the United Church of Christ, he was the chair of the Committee on Ministry. A candidate for ministry must meet with and be approved by said committee before moving on toward ordination. I remember feeling very small and very nervous standing in front of that committee with tall Reverend David Lee, in the chair as head of this group of ministers. Eventually, I graduated from seminary and was ready for my ecclesiastical council, where the candidate is grilled by the association people at large for approval for ordination. My mother, my sister, Lizzie, and my husband, Dave, came along for moral support at this event. It was there that David Lee noticed my sister. Lizzie and David Lee's courtship eventually ended with me performing their wedding right here at Plymouth. Talk about Judgment Day. I was a nervous wreck. Every minister in the association or in the whole state of Michigan was sitting right out there in the congregation. I was the nervous wreck. But the beautiful wedding came off without a hitch, as the saying goes, and it led to many happy years for both David Lee and my little sister and the rest of the family. I interject here that you probably noticed I referred to Reverend Smith as David Lee. You see, in my immediate family, my husband is known as Dave, our son as David. So once we acquired our third David, we decided to add his middle name to it so that everyone in the family would know which David you were talking about. If we remembered which David we needed to talk to, it worked just fine. As a brother-in-law, David Lee was a delight. This man could discuss any topic I could pick. He was a deep scholar with a wicked sense of humor as well. He was not only a good and loving husband to my sister, he also was truly an asset to our whole family. Rest in peace, my dear brother-in-law, colleague, and friend. You will be deeply missed.
Good afternoon. My name is Nolan Schreiber. I am the grandson of David Lee Smith. I wasn't originally planning, well, I was, on speaking, but I've been on the fence about it, and I finally thought, might as well do it. I don't have many words for you today, but what I would like to say is that my grandfather, David Lee Smith, was a huge male presence in my life. I wouldn't be where I am today without him. I am involved with many musical programs at school, and he is a huge inspiration for me. He loved music. He loved studies. He was the wisest man that I could ever talk. Like, whenever I would speak to David Lee, I felt really dumb. Like, whatever I would say, he already knew. And that carried out through my entire time of knowing him. When I would see him and my grandmother, the way that she looked at him and the way that she saw him is beautiful. At every family event, he's always there. And it's so weird to not have him around. It feels like there's this huge hole in our lives, and I know that's especially true for my grandmother, who for the last couple of years has been spending a lot of time taking care of him. One thing I would like to point out is that he was hopeful. Throughout all of his medical struggles, he held hope that he would always get up again the next day, that he would always live on and pursue. And that inspires me. I wish I could wake up and be as hopeful as he was. The last day that I saw him, we were over for dinner. I think it was one of our goodbyes. And Lizzie could not figure out how he wanted his foot pillows. He had this triangle thing that he wanted to prop his feet on, and she could not figure it out. I'm really glad I was able to help with that and figure out his foot pillows so he was comfortable in those final nights. I would like to close by thanking everybody who has been supportive and donated meals to my grandmother. And thank you all for being here today.
Good morning. Good afternoon. I'm going to take a look around here and see if I see any other polar bears besides the three I sat with. Great. Well, now I have to watch what I say then. Obviously, I'm not three people. I'm big as three sometimes, but one of our fellow classmates that had a speaking part is a resident of Hammond, Indiana, and there's quite a bit of snow between here and there, and so he had to stay home, and he sent me his remarks, and I've got them in my pocket, and I'll see if I can do a little, with all the musicians here, I'll do a little sight reading. And my remarks, though, I wanted to tell you that the early days of our contact with Dave go back, I don't want to make this a contest, but we've known him for over 60 years, and probably 63. And that goes back to the days when we that were members of the Riverside Junior High School bunch, we came over to Creston in '59, the fall of '59. So we've been around him for a long time. He was already there at Creston. He was a member of the junior high school at Creston. He was already there from 7th grade on. Anyway, let's see. Paul, the two members that aren't here, Paul and Bob and I, we were all brass players in the band, and we began our band career at Creston with David Lee on trumpet. Paul was our tuba player, and Bob and I were trombone players. We were trombone guys. And, that actually began a lifelong journey of becoming friends with that guy that you've already heard so many good things about. I would echo all of that. Over the next few years at Creston, the talents we were gifted with produced high ratings in competitions of band and orchestra as well as solo and ensemble. However, what we were really good at was having fun. 16 to 18-year-olds acting like 10, and we were experts. But so in June of '62, we moved on through graduation. We went on our separate ways doing life, but there was some continuation for the music careers. Bob Urich went on to Indiana University and played in their band, and David Lee was at Western Michigan. So they had that connection through the years. And then David Lee and Paul were reunited under the direction of our junior high band director, Elaine Parker Shaw, with I think it was called the Grand Rapids Symphonette. And so they did that for about 25 years with David Lee as the treasurer and Paul as the president. Now, as president of our senior class, Paul was involved every 5 years with committees producing our reunions. But in '22, David Lee joined the committee for work on the 60th and providing help in organizing that event. And without his help, we wouldn't all be connected to this day. He was kind of our glue. Now, Bob's comments, am I speaking too loud in this thing? Bob's comments are, some of it's humorous and some of it's serious, but he said, good afternoon, my name is Robert Urich. No, not that Robert Urich. I'd like to share some remembrances of Dave from my all too brief time at Creston High School. There was a bowling alley on Plainfield Avenue where we would tend to congregate. For some reason, I had brought my trombone with me one day. Maybe I was on my way home from school. I'll never know. There were several so-called musicians among us, just hanging around and talking school stuff. And at some point, my trombone became a topic of conversation. Dave, being a fellow brass player on the trumpet, asked if he could try it out. I agreed and handed it over to him. He put it up to his lips and proceeded to blast out some random notes. I was astounded, Bob says. The noise was loud, but unwaveringly steady and pure, velvet smooth. It was as if he was warming up with the Chicago Symphony, and Glenn Miller had to be smiling somewhere. He may as well have put away his trumpet right then and there. As for me, any illusions I had that I was a great trombonist quickly dissipated. My own sound out of that same horn now resembled that of a deflated titer, slowly leaking air. Thus became the beginning of Dave's lifelong passion for the instrument. It culminated in the degree of music that he got from Western. Well, see, Bob goes on, he says, imagine how that sound has fallen on countless ears, in countless bands, in countless places, his entire life. Looking back on Dave's epiphany, I take no credit for myself. It was all Dave and the magical trombone. I did wipe off the mouthpiece for him first, for whatever that counts. Then there was the day of the annual Creston Talent Show. This is where I have to do this. If I ran out of time, get the stage up. For the record, there was an annual Creston Talent Show, and Simon Cowell, at that point, was only turning 2, give you a context. Several of us band students had decided to form an Oompa band, much in the tradition of those at Oktoberfest. So this was the plan. We would dress in lederhosen-style clothing, and sometimes we could conjure up, or something we could conjure up from our own wardrobes, maybe borrow some suspenders from our dads, and would play the relevant, no, excuse me, I'll be all right. And after we got all dressed up, he says, meanwhile, we Oompa boys are maintaining our awkward, contorted position. How could this be? Okay, well, I may have butchered this, and I apologize for my sight reading. Okay, we've got them all dressed up like Oktoberfest. Meanwhile, the Oompa boys are maintaining our awkward, contorted positions on the floor. I'm screwing this up, and I don't know how this happens. Here it is. All right. They started figuring out what they were going to do. They had this all planned out, and they ended up doing something different than they had expected. They were all expecting Dave to show up dressed in his conductor's outfit, and there was another player that was supposed to come in off stage with his trumpet blasting, and he was supposed to just literally blow us away. In turn, we would start falling down, pretending to faint. That was it. Not much. Something even the Three Stooges would be ashamed of. There was one additional detail, though. We had convinced Dave to portray, okay, so he was supposed to come out looking like Leonard Bernstein. When we would start the comedy routine, he was supposed to act mortified, but doggedly determined to keep waving his baton, oblivious of the carnage, until eventually we would give up, throw it down, and walk away disgustedly, thereby ending the skit to gales of laughter, which didn't turn out the same that they were expecting. This is it. It's showtime. The curtain rises, we're all in our places, and Dave shows up wearing a blonde wig and dressed in a majorette uniform, skirt and all. Now, Bob says, I presume, I hesitate to, I crossed this out, but I presume he had acquired it when the owner wasn't wearing it. But combat boots completed the ensemble. In his hand, he held a mop, not a baton. What? No Leonard Bernstein? This was definitely not what we'd planned. It went downhill from there. We start the music, and Dave, in his ridiculous regalia, begins to act like he's keeping time by waving the mop around, stomping his boots, nodding his head up and down, and while keeping time and generally acting like an idiot. Keep in mind, this is our David Lee Smith, the gentle, well-behaved, clean-cut, 6'3", handsome, buttoned-down, well-mannered conservative ideal of what a young post-war era American youth should be, a paragon of decorum. Think Richard Cunningham on steroids. So much for that. Now, as we're following the script, murdering the notes as we go along, Bob enters with his trumpet and starts blasting away. On cue, we begin to twitch, flop around, collapse, and lie motionless. Now our made-up so-called conductor stops, and looking at the disaster he's facing, starts wailing, sobbing, screaming, and in an overdone falsetto screams out, "They're dead. All my boys are dead." Repeating as the crescendo increases, "All my boys are dead. They're all dead." Now cars are slowing down on Plainfield Avenue. He made that part up, he said. Meanwhile, we Oompa boys are maintaining our awkward, contorted positions on the floor, are now laughing hysterically at the sight of our crazy, grieving, hamming it up director going bonkers. In my warped teenage mind, it was the funniest thing I'd ever seen. So funny indeed, I just couldn't hold it anymore. The farce finally mercifully ended. I got up, discreetly untucked my shirt, and headed to my next class. Thanks a lot, Dave. It was early fall, and the University of Michigan was hosting a band day. As the title suggests, numerous high school bands from throughout the state were invited to participate with the vaunted Michigan Marching Band. About a half hour before the game, each band was to enter the stadium and wait for the marching band to arrive, and the pregame concert would begin. My dad, waiting up in the cheap seats, filmed our grand entrance. And he says, fast forward, it's 2024, and I'm viewing that old faded 8mm film, this time recorded on my DVR. The band members have long been indistinguishable, but the tall figure leading is clear as day. He's wearing a white uniform, trimmed in gold, carrying a matching scepter, and strutting like he had just started the Rose Parade. But then I suddenly picture him marching again, this time followed by a gaggle of all the souls he has prayed for, prayed with, comforted, celebrated with, dined with, marched with, laughed with, cried with, and zoomed with, married, baptized, buried, saved, and served our country and the Lord with, always leading with strength, purpose, conviction, love, and devotion during his incredible life's journey, all of them. The stadium is beginning to fill up. There may not be enough room left. And with apologies to Dan Fogelberg, he says, the leader of the band is tired and his eyes are growing old, but his blood runs through his instrument to the song within his soul. Our lives would be a poor attempt to imitate the man, or just a living legacy to the leader of the band. Godspeed, dear brother, and hello forever.
I don't know if I can follow that. But I found this piece, and I thought it just screamed David Lee. It says, I've taken in recent years to thinking about my funeral and have decided to make one paramount request. Play jolly music at that ritual. What good does it do to heap on dirges and other mournful melodies? I won't be there to be gratified by the grieving, and if I could tune in, I'd be happier to see those present have some relief. Dixieland would be nice. Joplin would be fine. Something by Fats Waller would certainly do. Those early jazz men knew what they were up to when they set about making funeral marches swing. So swing me away, please, with a rousing tune.
Can you all hear me? My mom said to speak loud, which isn't usually an issue, but she asked me to read this poem. Hang on, yeah. I've had a pretty good streak here with no tears. I think I'm going to break it, so whoever had the over-under on that, congrats. I just want to say a few things. Dave, he came into to my life. I was a pretty angsty, hard-headed, still am a little bit of that. Young man, probably wasn't a man, and he did have that look in his eye towards my mom. I didn't really appreciate it at the time, but you know how Dave was. He was so genuine and respectful, and I remember the phone calls. Hey Jake, Dave Smith, is your mom there? And you could not learn to sweeten up on the guy. And remember, he had the respect to, he asked for a mom's blessing, as they say in the South, for her hand in marriage. And I got to walk her down the aisle. They got married right here. And he became a very calming and healing presence for our family. Calming was a good asset to the team. And he was real good to me in the lot of years it took me to figure some things out. And I don't know if I ever got to really thank him, but I was actually just thinking now, right at the end there, he was home and he wasn't wearing much or anything actually. And I think he was milking it a little, and he just, his back was itchy, and I remember he would say, Jake, will you scratch my back for me? And I was like, this is probably the one free pass I'm going to give on that. So I should have the nurse stepped in and did it for me, but it's the thought that counts, I think. So I just want to thank Dave for being an important man in my life and for my family's life, and everybody's that he got to impact. So, all right. Lock it up, bro. All right. These are the words of Chief Tecumseh. Down south they say Tecumseh, that my mom asked me to read here. So, pardon me. So live your life that the fear of death can never enter your heart. Trouble no one about their religion, respect others in their view, and demand that they respect yours. Love your life, perfect your life, beautify all things in your life. Seek to make your life long in its purpose in the service of your people. Prepare a noble death song for the day when you go over the great divide. Always give a word or a sign of salute when meeting or passing a friend, even a stranger, when in a lonely place. Show respect to all people and grovel to no one. When you arise in the morning, give thanks for the food and for the joy of living. If you see no reason for giving thanks, the fault lies only in yourself. Abuse no one and no thing, for abuse turns the wise ones to fools and robs the spirit of its vision. When it comes your time to die, be not like those whose hearts are filled with fear of death. So when their time comes, they weep and they pray for a little more time to live their lives over again in a different way. Sing your death song and die like a hero going home. Love you, Dave.
Bruce Roller is under the weather today and could not join us. And that makes me David Reese. When I first met David, he was just plain David. No David Lee yet. I first met him in August of 1990 when I became the Associate Conference Minister for the Michigan Conference United Church of Christ. That's a fancy title for being a sort of a church bureaucrat. And I hadn't been on the job for very long before I got a phone call from David Smith. He wanted to make an appointment to come in and see me. We got it set up and he showed up at the appointed time. And that's how I became more than just a colleague of his, a friend, and a fellow traveler on a spiritual journey. When he was in my office that day, he told me about his ministry at Burlingame Congregational United Church of Christ. Told me about his time at Chicago Theological Seminary, his military background, and being part of a military band, even having the privilege of playing taps at veterans services. He was very proud of that. I learned about his Christian Reformed Church background. In a sense, he left that behind, but then he never left that behind. He grew up in that theological tradition, but now he told me he felt very much at home in the United Church of Christ, and he told me how he had no expectation of ever leaving Burlingame Church. A few weeks later, in the mail for me came a copy of David's United Church of Christ professional profile. That's a fancy name for a resume, 7 or 8 pages long, detailed all kinds of information. And it puzzled me when I got that profile, because that's usually what gets circulated when you're looking to move to a new church. So I called David up and said, hey, we need to talk. What's going on here? And he assured me that he was just following orders. I think that's from his time in the military. You're expected every 5 years to update your profile in the United Church of Christ, and he'd come to that 5-year period, so he was doing what he was supposed to do. He assured me again that he was not going to be leaving Burlingame anytime soon. And a number of years went by before he finally did retire from Burlingame Church. But he didn't retire from ministry. He served as an interim pastor at the First Congregational Church in Alpena, Michigan. They loved him up there, and he loved him. More than once, he thanked me for getting him connected with that Alpena opportunity, as it seemed to give him some new energy for ministry. After leaving Alpena, he did another interim in the area here, and then he joined the staff at, among all places, Fountain Street Church. Primarily, I think he was doing pastoral visitations and officiating at some weddings and funerals. He loved his ministry, and it was part of his spiritual journey to move from the Christian Reformed Church to the United Church of Christ and then to Fountain Street Church. He shared with many of us, his colleagues, a website that was quite simply beliefnet.com, or maybe it was .org, I'm not sure. And BeliefNet had a little quiz you could take to locate you on your theological spectrum. David was delighted to discover, after all of these years, he was now located somewhere in the neighborhood of Unitarians and secular humanists. Imagine that. So Fountain Street Church fit right in with him, or he fit right in with them. Among other things which captured David's interest, we've heard a lot about music and genealogy and all of that. The hours he spent putting together that genealogy also resulted in David writing his autobiography. I was privileged to read part of that, and it was pretty remarkable. He loved computers. He was a whiz at computers, I think. And for years, we had a clergy meeting the first Tuesday of every month. And when COVID came, we couldn't be doing that. So David set up a Zoom meeting, and all through the COVID shutdown, we still had our meeting the first Tuesday of every month. We just weren't all together in the same room. And that was a real boon to all of us. I don't recall exactly when or where on the time of his life journey David and Lizzie met. Linda has reminded us about that, and we've heard other aspects of that. But I do remember the absolute joy that David found in sharing life with Lizzie, and how easily he found a place in that extended family and became then one of 3 Davids. Finally, one little note. We shared a love for Brittany Spaniels. Marvelous dogs, great pets. Chris and I have had BJ. Dave and Lizzie had Ruby, and that's not bad at all. So I can say thank you, David, for being the unique, dedicated, caring, and curious person you were. You have enriched our lives measure upon measure. Thank you.
Can y'all hear me? There we go. My gratitude for the music today and the spirit in this room that has helped to strengthen us in this time. We'll hear these words from sacred scripture. Micah 6:8. He has told you, O mortal, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you? But to do justice, and to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. Second reading from Galatians 5, significant as it's on the wall, and it was from David and Lizzie's wedding. By contrast, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. There is no law against such things. And a third reading from Ecclesiastes, not ecclesiastical, and not the entire chapter. I promise. For everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven, a time to be born, and a time to die, a time to plant, and a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill, and a time to heal, a time to break down, and a time to build up, a time to weep, and a time to laugh, a time to mourn, and a time to dance, a time to throw away stones, and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. I prepared words this morning, and I've been writing ferociously as I've been hearing folks speak. A testament to the ways that David Lee has affected each and every one of us. I thought about the first time that I met David Lee, and I have a memory of him. I started pastoring here in August of 2018, and we had early potlucks, trying to get to know the church. And those potlucks were an opportunity for me to get to know folks a little bit around the table. And that's when I knew that I was going to love David Lee, because as he told his story, we were invited to share a bit of our spiritual autobiography, which I think he loves doing. This is a deep joy of his. He told me about the kid or the young adult who early started having those BS moments in church where he said, I just don't believe it. And that is the spirit that I saw in him and was like, we're going to be friends, because that is a spirit that I have carried with me from the beginning. He was unapologetic about his desire to question. He desired a thoughtfulness and a deep sense of reflection, and pretty much his theological growth, both from his Reformed tradition, but the early Baptist youth groups that he would go to, and finding his way to seminary, also where I went to seminary, and a number of us in this room. I think that troublemaker spirit that we were hearing about before in the band and in the symphonette, I think that probably carried with him also, because that same spirit was definitely present at CTS when I was a seminary student. But I think that's also speaks to a bit of the confidence and the ego that sometimes needs to come as a pastor in the church, especially, I'm going to say, as a transplant here to West Michigan, in many of the denominations that are present here. You need to be able to stand up to folks who are speaking about Christian supremacy. You need to be able to speak out against white supremacy. You need to speak up for the poor. You need to be able to speak up for those who are marginalized. And that's certainly a part of what he did in his ministry. I would have loved to have had David Lee on my committee on ministry as I was seeking ordination in the United Church of Christ. One of the things that he did when he came to Plymouth early on was started a class that was designed to get people to think about their spiritual journeys. And he created this poster that he framed, and it was quite large, and he brought it into the room. Some of us here were present for those gatherings. I see nods. And it was a chance to get people to talk about their stories, about how and where they found themselves in Christian community, and where they found themselves no longer fitting anymore into what they had learned. And that invitation to share the story of what were those moments? What were those moments that helped to push us to try something new? He invited those conversations, and I think it was deeply a part of his own journey. One of the things that I recall him talking to me about was his response to the traditional Reformed theological position on tulip, which is, and this is where that ego comes in, and I love it, because I love the phrase that starts this off. He sent this to me 2 weeks before he passed away, because we started talking about it again. But his acronym was MAPLE, in response to tulip. Everybody, the words tulip, anybody ring a bell out there? Not everybody it rings a bell for. Well, there's tulip, T being this total depravity, U, unconditional election, L, limited atonement, I, irresistible grace, and P, perseverance of the saints. David Lee created the acronym MAPLE, M being made in the image of God in response to total depravity. A, abundant freedom in response to unconditional election. P, potential salvation for all in response to limited atonement. L, liberal grace in response to irresistible grace. E, enjoyment and love in response to perseverance of the saints. There was a deep desire to stretch and to grow and to invite others into that walk. And that's something that I very much felt as a part of every conversation that I had with him. He was a deeply reflective individual, both on his life and the various eras of his life. I think that wisdom of that contemplation over his steps and his journeys contributed to the wisdom that each and every one of us have spoken to this day. I got to know David Lee, obviously, over these last 5 years, but in what David Lee would describe as, the last happiest 20 years of his life. Truly, it was a gift that Lizzie came into his life, and the family that has clearly enveloped him and has grown. Life and death are defined by transitions. And today, as we've remembered these stories of the eras of his life, those memories that come to mind for us, in each one of us has those memories. This text from Ecclesiastes comes to fruition even here. For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven. We live in a world that is constantly changing, and the writer makes this proposition that this ebbing and flowing, this waxing and waning from one extreme to the other, in which we experience in all points of our life. These are important moments for us to consider in this time, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. One of the memories that comes to mind over the last couple of months, after many falls, when the weariness was deep, there was joy, even though it was sparse. I heard about this National Emblem March that would be played as a rallying of spirits. And so I got to be there one day when this happened. And they played the National Emblem March, and David Lee, who hadn't gotten off that couch all day, and he had to work so hard in those last days. And there he was. He heard that brass band, and it lifted his spirit, and he started marching around the living room. It gave him some strength. He actually sat up in a chair and joined us in a conversation. In the midst of this season, when we're feeling deep grief, in this moment that I think about what you all have said, some of you have even asked, how can we get through? How will we make it through? I recall a conversation that David and I had. It was a moment where I saw him reflecting on his life, the hardships, and yet this deep sense of gratitude that was just so present in every conversation. After speaking about moments and journeys and even eras of his life for which he truly struggled, he said these words, and I wrote them down because I thought they were beautiful. The Spirit is so capable of rejoicing and rebuilding itself. And so, beloved, know these words. The Spirit is so capable of rejoicing and rebuilding itself. That wisdom that David Lee shared is the wisdom that we can hold in these days to come. As we mark the changes and the transitions that he experienced in life and into death, and as that same Spirit is a part of us that can help us to change, to grow, to rebuild, to maybe even rejoice. May we carry what we have shared here together, this wisdom, this love, this spirit into our lives. May David Lee continue to stay with us in these seasons as we go forth, as we champion love, as we champion Maple, as we champion that we can rejoice again. Amen. One note before this prayer, the words that were shared in this day's service, the family invited me to use from David Lee's own collection. And it was reflective of his own theological view and perspective. And so know that these words are truly his. And so hear this prayer and let us pray. Spirit of great mercy and eternal love, we are a people gathered in remembrance and in gratitude. And we sense your presence with us here. In the days to come, may all who grieve find comfort in your love. Help us to move forward, weaving the positive gifts of David Lee's life into the fabric of our own lives. Great Spirit of the universe, your love is from everlasting to everlasting, and to your eternal care, we commit the spirit of David Lee. Now he has passed from this world and lives with you. We who cherished his life seek grace in the days to come and learn to cherish the memory of his life. May we be strengthened in faith and with a passion to live with joy. In the name of all that is holy, we pray. Amen.
Good afternoon. My name is Jim Zwarenstein, and I am a past member and first sergeant of the 126th Army Band. It is my honor today to comment on the military background of Major Retired David Lee Smith. Dave entered military service in 1967 as an active member of the Air Force Reserve. He was in that for 4 years, and then he spent another 12 years as a member of the Michigan Air National Guard, all as a commissioned officer. It was after this he came into the orbit of the 126th Army Band. In 1984, he made an inquiry about joining the band. We knew he was a major in the Air Guard, and we were a little wary. We had dealt with all manner of commissioned officers in the past, and really to mixed reviews. Although he was ready to resign his commission, we were still uncertain of what his ambition was. Well, he did resign and his commission, and he entered the band in June of 1984 as Sergeant E5 Dave Smith. The rest of the story is a wonderful enlistment, and he quickly became a friend and fellow bandsman to all of us. He took on spots in the trumpet, French horn, and trombone, his most comfortable sections of the band. He volunteered to play taps at numerous military funerals and received his promotion to Staff Sergeant E6 in 1989. He took on leadership positions in an unassuming and caring manner. He presided at marriages of band members, and he was a spiritual guide for many. He was often referred to in the band as Reverend Sergeant Major Lee Smith, due to his history with the church and the military. He was funny, he was kind, he was thoughtful. He attended overseas periods and tours of Michigan. He has played in more cities in Michigan than I probably have time to count here. He has performed in Italy, Australia, Trinidad, Tobago, Alaska, and 3 different times in Latvia. With his wonderful voice, he became our announcer and narrator. His favorite and most meaningful narration was a speech set to music by Harold Walters. In 1957, General of the Army Douglas MacArthur gave his last speech to his beloved military academy at West Point. The title of the speech is Duty, Honor, Country. It says a lot about service. And the following is a paraphrase of that speech. Duty, honor, country. A code of conduct and chivalry of those who guard this beloved land. An ideal so noble that it arouses a sense of pride and yet humility. An expression of the ethics of the American man-at-arms. Duty, honor, country. Those 3 words build courage when courage seems to fail, regain faith when there seems to be little cause for faith, and create hope when hope seems forlorn. The American man-at-arms, above all other people, prays for peace, for he must suffer and bear the deepest wounds and scars of war. Duty, honor, country. The unbelievers will say they are but words, a slogan, or a flamboyant phrase. Every demagogue, every cynic, and every hypocrite will try to downgrade them to the extent of mockery and ridicule. The code of conduct which these words perpetuate embraces the highest moral law and will stand the test of any ethics or philosophies ever published for the uplift of mankind. Around 1,000 campfires, on 100 battlefields, listening for the witching melody of faint bugles blowing reveille, far-off drums beating the long roll. This is the story of the American man-at-arms. His name and fame are the birthright of every American citizen. In his youth and strength, his love and loyalty, he gave all that mortality can give. He has never failed us. Were he to do so, 1,000,000 ghosts in olive drab and brown khaki and blue and gray would rise from their white crosses, thundering those magic words, duty, honor, country. At this point, we're going to have a ceremony. I'd like you all to stand, if you would. When it comes time for taps, military, if you would render the proper salute. Honors, post.
and a closing benediction, but a note to after the Old Irish blessing, and as folks leave, we invite you to stay for a luncheon that's downstairs. The family has a delicious luncheon. You can find stairs as well as an elevator. So hear this benediction, written by David Lee Smith. See that there is nothing to fear. Bear witness to that which is eternal. Go forth into the world with dignity and noble purpose. Search all things and hold fast to what is good. Render unto no one evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted and help the afflicted. And may the peace of God, which passes all understanding, be with you. May courage and love bind us together, now and forever. Amen.
May the road rise to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. The sun shine